Warning: this film contains images and voices of Aboriginal people who have passed away.
Nyikina people are a Mardoowarra people, the traditional owners of the Lower Mardoowarra Fitzroy River in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. Throughout the past century, Nyikina people have adapted and responded to waves of government policies and actions aimed at marginalising Nyikina capacity for living independently on their land.
Aboriginal people have been consistent about what we mean by self-determination. It means to us the right to own our land, to control what happens on our land, to practice our culture freely with the certainty of passing on to our children our culture and law, and the ability to control through our own organisations those services that are provided to us by governments. The colonial structure of the Kimberley retards the region's economic progress and keeps Aboriginal people in poverty. We want to develop local economic initiatives so that we can free ourselves from the dependence and control of governments.
Nganga yang harinya nganga, pangalagara jiba bani, ubani cukuru ni, nyikina nganga, roll kinjana.
Me nyikina, nyikina, and me walmajaris. We talk about Unjumo, Nyikina. Unjumo been started before the Mardoowarra River. Unjumo been start any kind of thing, any kind of feed, any kind of fish and feed, and all that binding coming from Unjumo, and we gotta talk about Unjumo, and we make him good. Everyone might look back. Young people, new generation, the Unjumo might bring him up and make him work.
The sort of cultural knowledge is, it's in a sense, it can be very unifying for the generations. It can be what brings people together. Especially while I was young, growing up out on the station, I was involved in a lot of the cultural camps and things that were being run. So I can say, in terms of my own experience, what being part of culture was like, and going out bush and hunting and hearing the stories, hearing Wunyumbul, I can say it was really valuable to me.
I was born on Mount Anderson, but my mother was grow up in Liberinga because my grandfather took all his family back there. The two brothers got shot. As we was growing up on that side of the river, Fitzroy, people used to walk from here, from Mount House, to visit my family in Upper Liberinga and Mount Anderson. Walk. No riding horse, no motorcar, and walk back up this way to work. And these say history, what I've been told. I know who I am. I know I speak my language. I speak Bunava, I speak Mangala, because I grew up on Mangala on the other side of the river. Good family, right down to Eda, right down to Derby. Derby is a Nyikina town. Nobody changes anything. You don't change nothing. White man can change his rule, but black fellow don't change it. Even a God don't change his rule. Once one never bent. It still belongs there. You can go on this side of the boundary, but you have to be aware. You go this side, it's still the same. My family, I don't think they're going to change. They know who they are. They can go visit their own country, their grandparents' country, their grandmother's country, their great-grandmother's country. They can still visit, as long as they know who they are. We still got our young generation. We're still bringing up their rights, what their rights are in their own country. We might have grandparents from overseas, but we are still Australian Aboriginals.
It's really important to understand history, to understand pre-colonisation and post-colonisation, understanding how the Kimberley was developed and how that relates to how different parts of Australia was developed. For instance, some of the practices that white people practice in Sydney, they were still practicing it over here 130 years later in the Kimberleys. They were still culling people out for the purpose of just getting people off the country. And then you look at how it was sought to stop killing people. Then the assimilation policies came in and they were putting people either into missions or people became fringe dwellers on the stations, living on the outskirts of stations because they saw them as an important part of labour to build these industries.
Our leaders have been there from the original Nyikina days and have been working seriously to build the capacity of regional organisations in the Kimberley.
The main issue was the real issue of ownership of land, the real issue of rights, the real issue of having the responsibility to have a say in the way in which governments or departments deliver services in the community. So that brought about a more serious line of discussion in which the Kimberley Land Council was pretty much the only political voice that was structured enough to be able to take on the government about real Indigenous rights in this country.
They think that we people here are dumb to our land, but they don't quite understand what it means to us. We have things here that been handed from our great-grandfathers, and as this generation now still carry on the past. And this is more important to us. Even our sacred areas, those are the things that we really don't like the mining people to ruin up. That's the argument we have with the government all the time. But government don't hardly see what the point we really get at. They like to just take what they can see. They just don't know how much they hurt our feelings. It hurts our memories and our families and our young generations. But we hope this time will come when other governments might realize that there's a human being, hardly can read and write, but he still has protection over his land. What he can see, what he can hang on to.
Now what I'm saying is that we want the land rights and human rights and treaty be signed by the Australian government to realize that Aboriginal people will own the land, be an owner, because we might be died and gone tomorrow, but we want that for all of our generation, for Aboriginal race, to own the land.
And you can find that a person in his own state, in his own area, he sort of becomes alive again. That's why land right is so important. Aboriginal people in their own areas, they're different. They think, they even walk different to these people. For the simple reason they're more proud of themselves. They said, this land belongs to me, I belong to it. And the change, the mode, even the education will always, if it's changed, as a community school, as we talked about Nyikina, you'll find that these people will walk differently, they'll think differently, they become more proud and more self-assured of themselves. The security of knowing that land and them is them, you know, that's we belong.
The leadership and governance model that's emerged from Nyikina people has gone on to shape organisations such as the Kimberley Land Council, the Kimberley Law and Culture, the Kimberley Language Resource Centres, Magabala Books. Leadership models such as from my grandfather and that sort of period have shown that Nyikina and Mangla people have been able to build their capacity to be able to engage with the colonial experience. Nyikina and Mangla people have been working to build a culture conservation economy on country. In that time we have been investing in building and strengthening the social capital, the human capital and the cultural capital. We're looking at economic development, we're looking at pastoral and land management, we're looking at research and development, we're looking at housing and works, we're looking at a whole range of industries, in particular the tourism and ranger strategy. We see all these industries intersecting and being able to develop an extremely holistic model, and part of our equation is that we need serious investment from government, from philanthropic organisations, from non-government organisations to sit down and work with Nyikina Mangla people to build a model of best practice for land and natural resource management. Nyikina and Mangla people are looking at the whole of the Kimberley and saying that this is pristine wilderness that not only needs to be protected for Australia, but for future generations of the world. Some of the geographical features that we have on country are very, very precious spaces and places, and Nyikina and Mangla people want to be able to share that opportunity not only with Australians but people internationally. We believe the Kimberley is a wilderness area that really needs serious protection, and we believe that if we can develop strategies around tourism, land and natural resource management, at the same time building the human capacity of our workforce to be able to accommodate and deliver professional, first-class service on the ground in country as part of our sustainable livelihood strategy. We're also looking at the needs of the river in terms of better weed control, being able to manage the threats that are happening to the Fitzroy River in terms of mining, also in terms of unmanaged access to country and how those impacts are having a negative impact on the land and the natural resources in the area.
Some of the water resources are a real question in our lives now, and they're talking about damming the Fitzroy River, which will really impact upon the ecology of the river. There's this attitude there that if we dam the river we're going to really prosper, but my attitude is, well, you're going to prosper for 30 odd years or more, but after that you've really lost the environment for a long time and what lives in the environment. So to me it just doesn't weigh up. If you look at the history of damming rivers and having massive kinds of farming on the sides of the rivers, a lot of rivers in our country are pretty much contaminated. I've always been a strong advocate on looking at other forms of land use, whether you introduce stuff in agriculture or look at permaculture, horticulture, aquaculture, growing of trees. There are all those different types of land use that are there. Then on top of that you've got the tourism industries and you've got your small stores and you generate money like that pays for someone's wage, but it also contributes to the community in a bigger way. We need to start looking at bigger forms of economic development with our communities, because I believe economic development is the foundation, is the backbone to everything on top of it. And I think that's what's got to be the concept within our nation, is about strong people, strong culture, and a strong economic base.
I think there's a new conversation happening at the Australian level, and that conversation really needs to be seriously grounded in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We need to be looking at new ways to use that as international benchmarks for how we start to ground Indigenous development in the North. In more recent times, Aboriginal people in the North have become aware of this freight train of development. And Nyikina Mangla people are saying that we are ready to have a conversation with development, but that development needs to happen on Indigenous terms. One of the critical things that we're looking at in terms of being able to develop sustainable livelihoods on country is how do we create partnerships with the pastoralists, with irrigators, with corporate and with non-government organisations in terms of how we can start to invest in the region to develop sound business models that can show that we can build an economic model around future development in the north.
The Kimberley is important internationally because of the incredible landscapes here, the nature and the culture of this place cannot be found anywhere else on the planet. So what we're saying is the future industries of the Kimberley should be industries that do not have an environmental impact, and also they should be industries that are compatible with the culture here. The Kimberley is under attack. We know that there's the potential for coal, uranium, copper, diamonds, bauxite, iron ore, zinc, lead, as well as other precious metals. We know that this industry needs an incredible amount of water. We're really concerned that groundwater would be used and what that would mean for all the pools and the billabongs along the Fitzroy River, particularly in the dry season.
The Fitzroy River, or the Mardoowarra as known to traditional owners, has been listed as a heritage site for the whole of the river. The traditional ecological knowledge to date demonstrates that we are talking about a pristine living water system. Now, the Fitzroy River is connected to water soaks, to springs, and to date we still do not know and understand from a scientific perspective what the relationship is between underground water and surface water. Nyikina and Mangla people are very concerned at the moment because there is a proposal from a mining company to mine thermal coal on the Fitzroy River. The evidence that's coming out of New South Wales is showing that the technology that they're talking about is going to have some very serious negative impacts, not only on the river, but on the landscape and the environment.
In regards to high wall slot mining, it means that you're going to dig a very deep hole and hence you'll get a high wall, and the slot is about 40 metres at the bottom, and that slot will go on for about 5 kilometres. So they clear a lot of land to put all the dirt and the rock they take out. That's the overburden. They put that to the side. Then they go down, say, 200 to 400 metres to look for a coal seam that's about 1.5 to 2 metres, possibly 3 metres thick. Then they take out that section of the coal seam, and after they do that, they wash it and they process it and they store the water to the side. Then they go in 500 metres either side of the slot, so that they burrow in and take all the coal out, and then they process that coal. As they move along the slot, as they further develop it, they put in small dam walls and they replace the water back in. So all the toxic water that's been stored on the surface gets pumped back underground, the overburden goes back on top of that, and then that toxic water forms a toxic sludge that can seep through the cracks in the underground back into the waterways and back into the river and the aquifers.
By mining underneath the aquifer, the risk is that they'll crack the aquifer from underneath, and if they do that, then the loss of water is totally uncontrolled.
The big blocks of rock don't just move a little bit apart, they actually get shattered into myriad, billions and billions of new rock faces, so you've effectively got a great big pile of broken rock rubble. And on those faces, the minerals that have been held within the big blocks of rock for a long time, millions of years, are now exposed to the air and to the water that moves through them. And so those minerals can go into the water. So you get iron in the water, you get chlorides in the water, you get sulfates in the water. Some of that water will disappear into the rock mass and you'll never see it again. Some of it may re-emerge downstream, as the mining companies assert, but its quality is going to be much lower because of these minerals that have been picked up. Wherever that water goes, it will carry those minerals as pollutants with it.
We're also concerned that all the water would be used would get polluted and potentially go back into the river and poison some of the river systems there.
2 mines upstream were allowed to discharge mine water 2 megalitres a day into the river, so that our irrigation water was so saline that some days we could never use it. and it reached a stage where we just couldn't stay there any longer.
There is a lot of pressure on traditional owners to consider mining. The pressure is coming from government, it's coming from mining companies, and even from some Aboriginal organisations. I think it's time to consider what are the alternatives to mining, particularly alternatives that are going to produce sustainable development.
As far as we're concerned, this would have also an international impact. This coal would have a huge amount of greenhouse gases if it was to be mined and exported to India. And at the moment, every country in the world realises that we need to cut the amount of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. So we have a responsibility as a country and to future generations that we don't open a new coal province in the Kimberley.
Mining to date, right around this country, has not proven to be beneficial to Aboriginal people. The extraction of thermal coal from a pristine wilderness area is counterproductive. We need sound, rational discussion and debate. We need strong scientific evidence to show that the coal that's located within the Fitzroy River gravel bed is priceless. We cannot afford to mine that coal because of the implications to the ecosystem, to the environment, to the landscape and to the people.
One of the issues that often doesn't come up is what is the real cost of some of these mining efforts. And in terms of often the companies might say, well, the cost is whatever the cost of the equipment and the immediate removal of earth and the labor costs and all that, without talking about what's the cost to the community, what's the cost not only to the physical health of people, whether it's ingesting different materials in their lungs or whatever, like lead in children, the impact on their physical health, but what does it do to cultural health? What does that do when someone loses that connection spiritually? What does it do when a sacred river is so polluted that people can't go there to have ceremony, to drink the water, to bathe, or to do whatever they did traditionally in that river? What does that do to their sense of identity, to their sense of self-esteem, to their sense of who they are as Indigenous people and as in relationship with Mother Earth? And what we've seen, what I believe, is that that continued process of constant attacks on our self-esteem, on sacred sites, is one of the contributors to post-traumatic stress. So it's not just physical health, it's our mental, it's our emotional health that has multi-generational impacts.
There has not been an ethical conversation in regards to how we might develop sustainable development in the north around ethical principles and good scientific practice.
I'm an adjunct professor at the University of WA. I've been working in freshwater ecology for a long time and I've been involved in a lot of environmental impact assessments previously. And there are a whole range of impacts which could potentially happen here. Things like the cracking of the ground if we have deep underground mining. When you bring coal to the surface and hasn't been exposed to air and water before, it produces sulfuric acid, and unless that is some way completely contained, there's a potential for it to get into underground water sources and into rivers, and of course sulfuric acid in rivers would be a disaster. The problem is that whenever you take coal out of the ground, that coal is exposed to water and air and sulfuric acid will be produced. It's not the coal, it's the iron sulfite in the coal which will produce the sulfuric acid. And I cannot envisage a mechanism which would allow them to stop that from getting into the local waterways. Although the underlying geology might be known, you cannot guarantee there won't be cracks. And if there are cracks in that underlying geology, those cracks could be exactly where the toxic water will get through. Exactly the same argument was used in Margaret River, where they said the underlying geology would not allow the water to percolate into the aquifers and into the underground water. And the finding of the EPA was that that could not be guaranteed, because although the underlying geology might be known, you cannot guarantee there won't be cracks. And if there are cracks in that underlying geology, those cracks could be exactly where the toxic water will get through. And also, of course, you've got to take into account the fact that this area is prone to cyclones and floods. And although they might have a dam which can contain that water in most situations, I'm not convinced that they could do it in a cyclone situation where we have floods as we've seen around the country recently. At the moment, the company is only proposing one relatively small mine in the Duchess Paradise region. But that's a very, very small portion of the total lease area that the company has. In total, the company has a lease area of about 8,000 square kilometres, and that's a huge area around the bottom reaches of the Fitzroy River. Although they're only proposing at the moment to mine the Duchess Paradise, they certainly have leases which would allow them in the future to mine much greater areas than that. One of the things that the study has found out is that we simply don't have all the information we need to, at this point, to make an informed decision. For example, we don't know enough about the underlying geology to be absolutely certain whether water could or could not percolate through the rocks and into the underground water. And there are a number of other things that we don't know enough about either. For example, the DEC has lists of priority threatened endangered species here, and although they don't have examples of ones which occur right in the Duchess Paradise mine, there are many other species which might use that as part of their range, and we just simply don't know enough about them. So we could not possibly at this stage say that the development of an industrial complex here would not affect those species. We just simply don't know enough about them to say that. One of the other things we need to be certain of is the way in which water resources are connected, surface water to underground water and one aquifer to another. And I don't think that we have enough information about that at this stage, and that's something we would need to know. As scientists, we don't know enough about this area to make informed decisions about what would happen if there was a mine here. It's the traditional owners who have to make a decision about this, and they have to make an informed decision, and before they can make an informed decision, we have to know all of these things. We can't make an informed decision on things we don't know about. I think one of the other things we need to consider is the overall carbon footprint of a coal mine. And in doing that, you can't just consider the carbon footprint of the mine itself. You have to consider the carbon footprint of burning the coal that comes out of that mine. And in a country where we are talking at the moment about reducing carbon footprints and carbon trading schemes and things, it seems to me that it's not the right time in 2011 to be opening a new mine, particularly in a pristine area, where that coal that comes out of that mine would just add to the world's carbon footprint. If Australia is serious about carbon reduction in the future, then surely at this stage we should not be adding to carbon pollution by doing something we know produces extra greenhouse gases. In other words, we shouldn't be coal mining at all, leave alone opening new mines.
I think it's time to start to bring these sorts of issues to the table so that we can fully debate them, look at the cost burdens but also the cost benefits, and weigh that up to see, do we really need mining in the pristine wilderness of the Kimberley?
Mardoowarra, very important, that Nyikina people. We know in the portion of Mardoowarra, Blanche, Nyikina people. And what we gotta do? When they portion them, just sing. They're washing that, when they take them, just what they mine, and they're gonna let them go that water, rubbish water, and what we gotta do? We don't want them that mine. No river, no people.
I think one of the things that sticks in our mind is the message that was passed to us by a senior elder who passed away a couple of years ago, Jabbo. Jabbo used to sing and tell us the importance of Wallangari. The importance of the Wallangari song was, come in Yimardoowarra, come in Jabba Jabba, come in, all the different people, Mangla people, come to the river. Look at the river and see how important the river is. It is the river of life. So we believe that this is an important story, and it is our duty, our responsibility as Yimardoowarra people to share the story of the river of life with everybody.
From the research that I've done and the extensive research I've seen from other people, the science has shown us either the river or the mine, and unless Ray Resources can prove that that aren't the only two options, I'm not really satisfied for having the mine coming here. I think it'll disturb more than just the river, it'll disturb the people, the tourism industry of Broome. There'll be a lot of other jobs and stuff will be lost, only 50 will come out of the mine. So far it just seems like there's more negatives than positives.
I mean, the Fitzroy River supplies a lot of water to pretty much the whole Kimberley, so just to risk it, it's not good.
We haven't really been allowed to learn the information before they've made the decision that they want to go ahead and apply for the mining lease. I feel like the community should be allowed to have their opinions known and be given a period of time to actually have the research done before these mining companies just come in and say that we're going to do this here, this is already planned, we've already applied for it, hurry up and get your research done, we've given you a deadline.
I don't think that mining should be done along the Fitzroy River because no matter what sort they do, they're disrupting the whole environment there. And like, if you mess one little thing up, it can, you know, it's like the ripple effect, basically. So, you know, you do something over here, but it could affect something way down there.
Once they leave, we're going to be the ones that are left with the land, and we're the ones that are going to have to deal with it along down the track, along with our children and their children. It just feels like a really unsustainable and short-termed way to look at it.
There is this link between song and dance and culture and language that's directly involved with the land. And to just come in and decide that you're going to, you know, rip a bunch of stuff out of the ground, digest it and then leave without any kind of consideration of how that's going to affect the environment is also an inconsideration about the culture it'll impact upon.
They're talking about it creating jobs, but you look at it, there's not many jobs there. And are they really going to put in the time and effort to train up Indigenous people from the area?
At this point, the Kimberley is completely untouched and pristine, and we are on the point of being able to keep that the way it is for future generations, or we can rape and plunder it for a few dollars. Choice is ours.